Access Minnesota. Issues that matter to you. Access Minnesota brings you the newsmakers and the stories that shape our everyday lives, with analysis from University of Minnesota faculty experts.
Welcome to Access Minnesota. Right now I'm standing outside a liquor store in Minneapolis, but because it's a Sunday, the store is closed and I can't buy any alcohol. Minnesota's ban on the Sunday off sale of alcohol is just one of many rules and restrictions placed on the buying and selling of liquor. This month on Access Minnesota, we talked to Frank Ball, Executive Director of the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association, to find out more about Minnesota's liquor laws. But first on the show, a look at how our modern liquor laws came to be. University of Minnesota history professor Jeffrey Pilcher takes us back to a time in the U.S. when the manufacture, sale, and transportation of alcohol was constitutionally banned. Jeffrey Pilcher is a professor of history at the University of Minnesota. He teaches a course titled Drink in History. Professor Pilcher, welcome to Access Minnesota.
Thank you.
For a 13-year period beginning in 1920, the sale, manufacture, and transportation of alcohol was banned in the United States. How did powerful anti-alcohol groups set the stage for what we call prohibition?
Well, prohibition was really part of the confluence of a number of trends that were taking place during the progressive era. The progressive reforms were really a reaction against the changes that modernity had brought through industrialization. And so many people in the United States wanted really to take control of their lives again. In some ways, it's quite similar to the responses that are taking place today about the changes of this sort of postmodern society. And so there were a number of these progressive reforms, and prohibition was really connected to a lot of them. The first cause of it was really almost a religious sense that comes out of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and that really goes back to the Second Great Awakening of the 19th century, a religious movement led largely by Protestant groups that sees the saloon as a cause of immorality within American life. So there was this religious component to it, but it was also tied up into many other things. One was seen as an attack on corporate control, and so it was really part of the movement towards a national income tax, which of course was the 16th Amendment, to before the prohibition of the 18th Amendment. And really that income tax was essential for the passage of prohibition because the U.S. government relied in large part on excise taxes on the sale of alcohol. I mean, the government could literally not have run without the money made by taxing alcohol. And so before the income tax was created with the amendment in 1913, prohibition on a national level was simply inconceivable. Another trend, another part of this progressive movement was the battle for women's suffrage, right? And of course that becomes the 19th Amendment, allowing women to vote. And this was another long-standing struggle in American history by women to claim the vote. And yet there were large parts of the society large parts of society, there was the liquor interest, right, the manufacturer of alcohol, who felt that if women got the vote, that prohibition would follow immediately, right? And so as the women sort of organized to gain political rights, that became tied into the temperance movement as well, right? So there were a lot of suffragettes who were involved in the women's Christian temperance movement. And then one final element of the prohibition sort of cause of this vast movement towards progressive reform was frankly a nativist sentiment, a reaction against the large number of immigrants who were coming to the United States in the late 19th century. And in part in response to the rise of industry and of the jobs that were created by it. And so a lot of these immigrants were coming from Southern Europe, from Eastern Europe, and these they tended to settle in cities, and they tended to drink alcohol. And so this movement of prohibition was really a response against this, as sort of a way of challenging it.
What was the drinking culture in America like prior to Prohibition?
Oh, there were many drinking cultures in America. There wasn't one single culture, although the saloon kind of represented the quintessential image of drinking culture. But you know, there were each ethnic group had its own different ideas. And so, for example, the German beer garden was a boisterous place where families would gather on a Sunday afternoon. You know, husband and wife would each have a beer, the children would play about. And so it was very much a family gathering. So that was one drinking culture. And there were other communities, Italian immigrants, you know, who would drink a bottle of red wine over the family dinner, and that was their drinking culture, you know, carried over from Europe. It was the idea that alcohol was food, that they were consumed together, a glass of wine with a plate of spaghetti, that they were just naturally seen together. Another drinking culture was the culture of the saloon, right? Of masculine conviviality. You know, men who worked together would gather together afterwards, and the relaxation, the amusements of the saloon would be another way of building solidarity between people who, you know, who sort of their working life, that the saloon was an extension of that. Okay, so that was a third drinking culture. You might say that a fourth drinking culture was actually held by the Drys themselves. That, you know, having a bottle for medicinal purposes only, you know, taking a shot at home for a housewife of alcohol. Or a farmer who has apple cider, you know, a barrel of apple cider sitting out there on the edge of the home, so that, you know, when he works his. So these might be people who support temperance and yet who engage in drinking themselves. They were actually referred to as the wet Drys, as opposed to the dry Drys, the people who were politically supporting temperance and who actually abstained from alcohol. And the two groups were very much different.
When Access Minnesota returns, more on Prohibition and why it was ultimately repealed.
Access Minnesota will return after these messages.